She's not family, she was paid to be here. That was Brigitte speaking, not whispering. Speaking, in a room full of people who all heard it. The notary's hands were still. That's what Kemi noticed first, not the folder on the desk, not the sealed envelope, not the 8 other people arranged in chairs around a boardroom table in a Scarborough office building on a Tuesday afternoon in March. The notary's hands, which had been moving steadily, uncapping a pen, shuffling pages, adjusting his glasses, and then simply stopped. He had read this document before, in private, and when he finished, he had driven home in silence and sat in his driveway for 20 minutes before he could go inside. Because the man who wrote it had asked him to read it in front of everyone. But before we get to what was inside that folder, let me tell you about the woman by the window. The one in the gray coat who had set a canvas bag carefully on the floor when she came in, as if the thing inside it might need steadying. The woman who, when Brigitte said what she said, looked at the wall and folded her hands in her lap and said nothing. This story doesn't start in that office. It starts 9 years earlier, in a shared kitchen in Scarborough, with a pot and a woman who didn't have enough and gave everything anyway. Now, before I go on, if you're the kind of person who believes that the ones who show up quietly matter more than the ones who show up loudly, stay with me. Because what gets read in this room is going to rearrange every single person in it. Hit subscribe if you love stories where the truth finds a way out, because it always does. It always does. Kemi Adeyemi arrived in Toronto in February of 2014. She was 23 years old, from Surulere in Lagos, and she had 2 checked bags, a carry-on, a student visa for a nursing program at Centennial College, and 380 Canadian dollars that she had converted at the airport, which felt like a lot until she took the 52 Lawrence bus east and understood the price of a room in this city. At the bottom of the larger bag, wrapped in 3 layers of old fabric and wedged beside her winter boots, was a clay pot. Terracotta, unglazed, rough at the rim where the lid had chipped sometime in the 90s. Her mother had pressed it into her hands the night before the flight. "Mama, I'll buy one there." "You will not find the same one there," her mother said. Not unkindly, just certainly. The pot was old. Her mother had gotten it from her own mother, who had carried it from a market in Oguta when she was first married. 3 generations of cooking. 3 generations of keeping people alive with what was in it. It had a smell that had no name, clay and smoke and palm oil, and the particular warmth of a kitchen that was used every day by someone who meant it. Kemi brought it to Toronto. She put it in the corner of the shared kitchen in her student housing in Scarborough and cooked egusi soup every Friday night. And her 3 housemates, 1 from Kenya, 2 from Jamaica, would drift in before the soup was finished, bowls already in hand. "You didn't make enough again," said her housemate Diane. "I always make enough, you always eat too much." She scraped the last of the pot into Diane's bowl and ate crackers with peanut butter standing at the counter. She didn't tell anyone. That was just how it went. She finished her PSW certification while working through her first year of nursing prerequisites. Personal support work paid faster than waiting for a full nursing license, and she had tuition and rent and money she was sending back to Lagos every 2 months without fail. Her first placement was a retired school teacher in Agincourt. Her second was an older man in Pickering, who called her by the wrong name for 3 months until she corrected him firmly on a Thursday morning, and he apologized and never did it again. Her third placement was Emmanuel Boakye. Emmanuel was 74 years old. Ghanaian Canadian, born in Kumasi, arrived in Toronto in the winter of 1978. He had built a modest empire in fabric import, kente and adinkra cloth and handwoven goods moving between Toronto and Accra, and had lived in the same detached house in Malvern since 1989. 4 bedrooms, a kitchen with high ceilings, a garden in the back that he had once kept beautifully, and now could not manage because of what the arthritis had done to his knees. His wife had died in 2010. His son, Otto, lived in Oakville. 40 minutes without traffic, he called on Sundays. He visited at Christmas. He was not a negligent son in any technical sense. He was simply very far away in every sense that mattered. Emmanuel did not want a PSW. He had agreed to it because his doctor had told him, after a fall in February, that he needed someone in the house for medication management and physiotherapy support. He was proud, private, and deeply unhappy about the arrangement. Kemi introduced herself at the door. He looked at her and said, "You're very young." "I'm 24, she said. "My granddaughter is 22. "Then you know we're capable of things." He almost smiled, almost. The first 2 weeks were formal. She managed medications, ran through the physio exercises, prepared meals from the agency's suggested menu: oatmeal, chicken soup, roasted vegetables, nothing that asked anything of anyone. Emmanuel ate everything with the resigned politeness of a man eating cardboard. On the third Friday, Kemi brought the pot. She hadn't planned it. She'd made off on Ugbu bitter leaf soup. At home the night before, a full batch, more than she and Diane could finish. The container leaked in her bag on the bus. She went back to her apartment, transferred everything into the pot itself, patted it inside a reusable grocery bag, and carried it to Emmanuel's house because she was already running late, and there was no better option. She set it on his stove, she reheated the soup, she served it with no ceremony. Emmanuel looked at the bowl. "What is this?" "Of Onugbu leaf soup, it's Nigerian." "I know what it is. The woman on Lawrence Avenue near Don Mills used to sell it." He picked up his spoon, he ate one mouthful, then another. He said nothing for a full minute. "It's not bad," he said. "It's very good," Kemi said without looking up from her intake notes, "but you don't have to admit that yet." He ate the whole bowl and then sat for a moment in his kitchen, looking at nothing in particular. The next morning he asked carefully whether there was any left. There was. She had packed extra just in case. "Why?" he asked. She shrugged. "When someone is hungry and you have a pot, you cook, that's all." That was how it started. Not with warmth exactly, with soup, and then, slowly, with the kind of trust that can only grow in kitchens, between people who are willing to stay long enough to learn each other's habits. By spring, Kemi knew Emmanuel's silences the way you learn the sounds of a house at night. She knew he went quiet around 3 in the afternoon because that was when he used to watch the news with his wife, and the habit of the hour had outlasted the person he'd shared it with. She knew he pressed his thumbnail into his left palm when something was wrong and wouldn't say so. She knew that when he was content, genuinely, privately content, he hummed old high-life melodies, formless and low, that he seemed unaware of producing. She learned Twi, not fluently. Her Yoruba was stronger, her Igbo workable, but she learned enough to make him stop what he was doing and look at her. "Maida wo ace," she said one Tuesday morning. She had practiced in the bathroom, phrasebook open on the edge of the sink. Emmanuel's face did something complicated. "Your tone is wrong." "Then teach me." He did. Every evening for 2 weeks after dinner he corrected her Twi, and she corrected his Yoruba, and they argued pleasantly about whose language was harder. And both of them were right, and neither of them would admit it. And those were the best evenings either of them had had in years. Neither said that out loud. Emmanuel told her about Kumasi, about the fabric market where his mother had worked, bolts of kente stacked to the ceiling, about arriving in Toronto in January 1979 and standing completely still on Bloor Street in the middle of a crowd because he could not understand that the world was allowed to look like that. White and silent and cold beyond anything he had language for. Kemi told him about Lagos, about Surulere before 6 in the morning, the sound of her mother grinding pepper before the rest of the street was awake, about failing her first nursing exam by 2 marks and sitting in the parking lot of Centennial eating chin-chin from a bag until she felt ready to go home and tell her mother. Did she say she told you so? No, she made pepper soup and said nothing. That was worse. Emmanuel laughed, a real one, the first Kemi had heard from him. She called her mother in Lagos that night. "You made a man laugh today," she said. "Good," her mother said. "Keep going." She started calling him Baba around month 6. Not by accident. Deliberately, on a Monday morning when she arrived and found him standing at the back window looking at the garden he couldn't tend anymore. She said it quietly, the way you test something to see if it will hold. He didn't say anything. He didn't tell her to stop. She took that as the answer it was. Otto Boakye was not a bad person. This matters. He was busy in the way that successful men are busy when they have organized their time so efficiently that there is no longer any room in the schedule for the things that cannot be scheduled. He had a good job, a good house in Oakville, a son in private school, and a wife named Brigitte, who managed their life together with the precision of someone who had decided very early that precision was the same as control and control was the same as safety. Brigitte was sharp. She was educated. She was also the kind of woman who, when something did not fit her understanding of how things should be organized, made quiet, methodical adjustments until it did. A PSW who brought her own pot and stayed past her scheduled hours and knew the patient's proverbs was not something that fit. It started with the hours. The agency was told that Kemi's visits should end at 5:30, strictly. Then the weekends were reassigned to a different worker, someone Brigitte had requested specifically. No explanation given. The agency didn't ask. The person who replaced Kemi on Saturdays was competent and kind and knew nothing about high-life music or bitter leaf soup, and Emmanuel was polite to her in the formal way he had been polite to Kemi in the first 2 weeks, and that was that. Emmanuel asked Kemi about it. "Why aren't you here Saturdays anymore?" They rescheduled. It happens sometimes. It didn't used to happen. Kemi made his tea and left it on the side table and moved on. Then came the pot. Brigitte arrived on a Wednesday afternoon, something about a leak in the upstairs bathroom, and found the clay pot on the stove, the kitchen smelling of crayfish and greens. Kemi wasn't there. It was her day off. The pot sat clean on the burner the way Kemi always left it. "What is this?" Brigitte asked. "Kemi's pot," Emmanuel said. "She cooks from it. This kitchen has a set of Le Creuset. She doesn't need to bring her own equipment. It's her pot. She brought it from Nigeria." Brigitte moved it to the lower cabinet. When Kemi came Thursday, she found it and moved it back to the stove. When Brigitte came Friday, she moved it to the utility closet. When Kemi came Monday, the utility closet had a padlock on it. Kemi stood in front of that padlock for a long time, long enough to understand what was being communicated and to decide how she would carry it. She went and made Emmanuel his breakfast. Later, during his afternoon stretches, she noticed him pressing his thumbnail into his palm, the left hand the way he always did, and she said simply, "I know." "She put it in the closet," he said. "I know, Baba. That was my wife's closet." "I know." He pressed her hand once, briefly, the way old men do when there are no adequate words, and looked out the window. Kemi brought the pot home that evening. She carried it on the bus, the 116 east toward Scarborough town center, the pot wrapped in the grocery bag on her lap, and she thought about what her mother had told her at Murtala Mohammed Airport 10 years ago. "You will not find the same one there." She cooked from it every Sunday at home after that. She made 2 portions. On Tuesday morning, she brought Emmanuel's share in a standard plastic container with a lid that Brigitte could not object to, because it was just food, just a container, nothing anyone could padlock. Emmanuel always knew where it came from. He ate slowly and carefully and left the container on the counter. When Kemi picked it up, he said nothing, except sometimes, "The crayfish was good this week." The crayfish is always good. Don't get proud. Too late. The move to Ajax came in 2021. Emmanuel's knees had worsened enough that the stairs in the Malvern house were no longer safe. A private care home in Ajax was arranged. Good staff, clean facility, 45 minutes from Oakville. The house in Malvern was listed and sold within 3 weeks. Kemi found out from Emmanuel 2 weeks before it happened. "They're moving me to Ajax," he said one Tuesday afternoon. She put the container down. "When?" "End of the month." "Are you all right with that?" He shrugged. It was an "I've run out of fighting" shrug, which is different from an all right shrug, and Kemi knew the difference. She applied to transfer with the agency to the Ajax facility. Brigitte contacted the agency to request a fresh care team for the transition. Kemi was not permitted to transfer. She visited on her own time, Saturdays, sometimes Sundays. The 401 East and then Durham Region Transit, an hour and 15 minutes each way when the connections worked, longer when they didn't. She brought containers. She brought the pot once, tucked inside a large canvas tote, and cooked in the facility's small family kitchen while a staff member watched from the doorway. "I think you're supposed to use the facility's cookware," the staff member said. "I'm just reheating," Kemi said, which was partially true. Emmanuel ate 2 portions at a table in the common room. He didn't hum. She noticed that. He hummed when he was content, and he had not been content in Ajax, and she knew this and said nothing because saying it would not change the geography. "You shouldn't come all this way," he said. "It's not that far." "It's far, I can see it on you." "I'm fine." "Kemi." She looked up. "Medawo Ace," he said. His tone was perfect. It had always been perfect. She drove home, she had a used Civic by then, and sat in the parking lot of her apartment building for 19 minutes. Not because she was upset, because some things need exactly that long before you can go inside. Emmanuel Boakye died on a Thursday morning in early March. He was 81. He died in his sleep at the Ajax facility, peacefully between the 6 a.m. check and the 7 a.m. check. A care aide noted in the file that he had been humming the evening before. She wrote it down because it was unusual. He had been quiet for months, patient in good spirits, vocal, humming. Kemi found out from an automated agency message flagging that her client file had been closed. She was in a Costco parking lot in Scarborough when her phone buzzed. She read the message. She understood it. She sat with the engine running for a very long time. 9 years. She drove home. She made bitter leaf soup from the clay pot, which was not something she did on Thursdays, but her hands needed to do something they knew how to do. She ate alone at her kitchen table with the second bowl covered by a plate. Across from her, the way she always covered his portion. She didn't say goodbye out loud. She said it to the pot, the way her mother had taught her to say things to people who were no longer there, quietly, facing the stove, before the food was done. Meda Wawasa Baba. The meeting was 3 weeks after the funeral, a notary's office on Birchmount Road in Scarborough. 9 people, the notary Mr. Reinhold, Otto, and Brigitte, Emmanuel's cousin from the community association, his business associate, 2 old friends. And Kemi in the gray value village coat she'd worn to every important occasion since 2019. She brought the pot. She didn't know exactly why. It felt wrong to leave it behind. Brigitte looked at the canvas bag. "She's not family," Brigitte said. "She was paid to be here." Kemi set the bag by the window. She looked at the wall. Mr. Reinhold opened his folder. His hands, which had been moving until that moment, went completely still. He had prepared this document with Emmanuel 18 months before Emmanuel died. Emmanuel had come to the office on his own, an Uber from Ajax which had taken 40 minutes and cost him more than he'd said to anyone. He had been clear and specific. He knew the exact numbers. He knew every name. The 2 independent witnesses had signed their assessments. Mr. Reinhold had kept the original handwritten letter as well as the typed version, because Emmanuel had asked him to show the room his actual handwriting, so they would know it was his actual hand. Mr. Reinhold read the standard portions first, the house proceeds in trust, the business holdings, the community association endowment that everyone in the room had already heard about at the funeral. Then he stopped, looked up briefly, looked back down. "To Kemi Adeyemi, I leave the sum of $240,000, the contents of the account detailed in Schedule C, and the following instruction." Brigitte's chair scraped. Mr. Reinhold continued. He read Emmanuel's words, Emmanuel's own words, in Emmanuel's own hand, typed for legibility, and then held up briefly in the original so the room could see the letters slanting left the way they always had, the particular weight of a fountain pen on thick paper. "Kemi came to my house when I had stopped expecting to be known. I had my health problems and my routines and a son I loved but couldn't reach, and I was not expecting anything to change. She brought a pot. I am not sure I can explain, to anyone who hasn't experienced it, what it means to have someone cook for you from their own pot. Not from your kitchen, not from your supplies. Their own pot that they carried on the bus from their apartment, wrapped in a bag, because they thought you might be hungry and they had enough. That is not a professional decision. That is a human one. And I have been in this country since 1978, and I have built things, and I have known many capable people, and the most human thing anyone has done for me in the last 20 years was Kemi Adeyemi at my stove on a Friday afternoon, making soup from a pot older than both of us, for no reason except that she had it and I needed it. A woman on the other side of the room pressed her hand over her mouth. She called me Baba. I did not ask her to. I did not tell her to stop, because I am not a foolish man, and I know the difference between what people do for money and what people do for love. She did both. But the love was real. My wife would have seen it immediately. My wife would have said, "That one has a good heart." I should have said it myself in this room, at the dinner table, to my son. I did not say it because I was too old and too stubborn and too afraid of what would be made of it. That was a failure. This is my attempt to correct it. Otto was looking at the table. His jaw was tight. Kemi watched him long enough to understand it was not anger. I asked my son to know her, not to be angry on my behalf. I was not angry. I was grateful. I want him to know that the years after his mother died were bearable because of the woman who brought soup. That's what I needed him to know. And I was not brave enough to say it at dinner. So I am saying it here, where it is permanent. Mr. Reinhold folded the page. Brigitte stood. He wasn't well when this was drafted. There are grounds. Mrs. Mensacole. Mr. Reinhold's voice was not unkind. It was the voice of a man who had anticipated this moment and had decided in advance how he would handle it. This will was prepared 18 months before your father-in-law's death. I assessed his capacity personally on that day. He was oriented, specific, and clear. I have signed assessments from 2 independent witnesses. The will is legally binding. You are welcome to consult your own counsel, but I want to be honest with you about the likelihood of a successful contest. Brigitte sat down. The room was quiet. Then Kemi stood up. She had not planned to speak. She had not written anything. But she had been carrying something in her chest for 3 weeks that needed a door, and the door had just been opened by an 81-year-old man who had carried it all the way to the end. She reached into the canvas bag. She lifted out the pot, old, dark terracotta, chipped at the rim, the bottom blackened from years of real heat, and she set it on the chair beside her. I brought this today because it felt wrong to leave it behind, she said. He used to watch me cook from it. He'd sit at the kitchen counter and find something to criticize. The heat was wrong or I was adding the onion too early, and I'd argue with him. And those were very good evenings. No one moved. He was a proud man. He didn't always show what things cost him. When his knees were bad and he couldn't get to the garden, he would stand at the back window and look at it. And I would go out and do what needed doing, and he would give instructions from the window, and I would pretend to listen. Sometimes he was right. I did not tell him that. She looked at the pot. He taught me to say thank you in Twi. He made me practice until my tone was correct. That is not something you teach a PSW. That is something you teach someone you expect to carry the language somewhere. She looked at Otto directly. Your father talked about you every week, not about whether you visited enough. He worried about whether you were sleeping enough, whether the commute was too hard, whether your son was happy in school. He loved you in the way of a man who did not know how to say it in person. And I mean this kindly, that you also have that quality. I think you know what I mean. Otto pressed his thumb into the edge of the table, brief, unconscious. The thumbnail on the left hand pressed inward. The same gesture, the same hand. Kemi looked away. Some things you hold without naming them. I'm not here for the money, she said. I need to be honest. I could use it. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. But that is not why I am shaking right now. Her voice was steady even as she said it, and the people in the room understood the difference. I am shaking because a man who had every reason to be tired decided to use his last years to actually live over soup, over a card game on a Wednesday evening, over a Twi lesson in a kitchen in Malvern. He thought no one was keeping track, but he was keeping track of everything, and he put it all in writing, in his own hand, with his own pen. She paused. The dead keep better records than the living. That is the thing I will remember for the rest of my life. She sat down. The room exhaled. Otto called her that afternoon. She was in the parking lot, the clay pot in the back seat of the Civic, the engine running. I want to apologize, he said. You don't have to. I do. Not for the will. That was his choice to make. For the rest of it, I knew what was happening, and I let it happen, and I told myself it was about appropriate boundaries, but it wasn't. The truth is, I was ashamed that someone who came to work in his house knew him better than I did. That's the honest answer. Kemi didn't speak for a moment. He knew you loved him, she said. He shouldn't have had to infer it. No, but he wasn't angry at you. He was sad that you were both so careful with each other. The distance wasn't the problem. The carefulness was. Silence. He had a habit, Otto said slowly. He used to press his thumb into his hand when something was wrong. I saw him do it my whole childhood. I never knew what it meant. He did it when he missed people, Kemi said, when he didn't know how to say something. A pause. I do the same thing, Otto said quietly. I noticed, Kemi said, in the office today. Another silence, longer this time, the kind that comes after a truth that cannot be taken back and does not need to be. He was humming when he died, Otto said finally. The staff told us. They wrote it in the notes. I didn't know what song it was. I do, Kemi said. She hummed it then, over the phone, sitting in the parking lot in Scarborough. A high-life fragment, low and formless, the melody Emmanuel had never seemed aware he was producing, the one she had learned by being in the same room with him for long enough to absorb it. Otto didn't say anything for a long time. That's it, he said. Yes. He hummed that my whole life. I never knew where it came from. It came from Kumasi, Kemi said. He learned it from his mother, and he hummed it every time he was content. I think he was content at the end. She heard Ato's breath change. I think he was, he said. 3 months later, Ato brought his youngest daughter to Kemi's apartment in Scarborough. The girl was 7, serious-faced, with her grandfather's eyes and the particular stillness of a child who has recently learned that the world contains things she was not told about. Kemi made off onugbu. The girl ate one bowl and then looked at the pot on the stove. Is that a special pot? It's an old pot. It came from Nigeria. My mother's mother bought it at a market in Ogata before she was married. Why do you still use it if it's so old? Kemi thought about this for a moment. Because it still works, she said. And when something still works, you don't put it away just because it's old. The girl considered this the way 7-year-olds consider things when they sense there is more underneath the words. My grandpa had old things too, she said. Papa says he never threw anything away. He was right not to, Kemi said. She ladled a second bowl without being asked. The girl ate it without looking up, focused and serious, the way Emmanuel had always eaten, as if food deserved full attention and anything less was a kind of rudeness. Kemi did not say anything about the resemblance. She just watched, and she was glad. Kemi used part of the inheritance to finish her nursing degree. She had been 6 courses short for 11 years, the credits sitting at the edge of a life that had no edge to put them on. She enrolled that September. She graduated 2 years later, on a June morning at Scarborough Civic Center, in a gym that smelled like floor wax and folding chairs. Her mother flew from Lagos for the ceremony. She cried the entire way through. Afterward, she presented Kemi with a new clay pot she had found through a ceramicist in Kensington Market, a West African artisan who had moved to Toronto 5 years earlier and worked in the same terracotta tradition, deep red, heavy, shaped almost exactly like the old one. You didn't need to, Kemi said. The old one earned its rest, her mother said, but the new one needs to learn. The second decision Kemi made was a fund, established through the West African Community Center on Danforth, small, specific, designed to do exactly one thing, close the gap for PSWs and home care workers who were 6 courses short, or 2 semesters short, or $2,000 short of the credentials that would change the rest of their lives. The kind of workers who cooked from their own pots and rode an hour and 15 minutes on 2 buses to visit someone they weren't required to visit. She named it the Terracotta Fund. She kept Emmanuel's photograph on her kitchen wall, just one. Emmanuel at the counter in Malvern, 2017, watching her cook, expression skeptical. She knew he was about to say something about the onion, entirely himself, in a kitchen that smelled like home. She kept the old pot too. Not for cooking, for keeping. It sat on the shelf above the stove, dark and chipped and entirely itself, older than the country it had come to, outlasting the people who had carried it, and the hands that had washed it, and the padlocked closets that had tried to contain it. Her mother had a saying. She said it every morning before sunrise, standing at the stove before the rest of the street was awake. Anu toto juejela. A love deeper than blood. Emmanuel Boakye had not been Kemi's father. He had been her client, and then her patient, and then her friend, and then something for which there is no professional category and no checkbox on a form. He had been the person across the table, eating soup, correcting her twi, pressing his thumbnail into his left palm when there were things he didn't know how to say. He had been the man who wrote her name in his own hand, with tears on his face, in the only document that speaks after death. And that was enough. It had always been enough. The pot sat on the shelf and did what it had always done, even on the days nobody asked it to. It held the warmth. That was all it knew how to do. And this is ancient African folktales, where we never let the ones who hold the warmth go unnamed. Is there someone who fed you, in every sense of that word, and you haven't found the words yet? Drop their name in the comments. Wherever you're watching from tonight, let them be known. We'll see you in the next story.